So much of life and problem solving generally is learning how to ask the right questions the right way. I've started dealing with some mentoring calls almost experimentally because we have so many people that are responded that it's difficult to figure out how we're going to meet them all. But anyway, I've met a few, and the biggest issue that I have is people are much more fascinated with my background in business. My background as an entrepreneur. My background is somebody who's sold a few businesses. In other words, somebody that has been, quote unquote, successful in life. And the way I look at it, I'm using those examples of so-called success to establish street cred, so to speak. In other words, I've been there, I've done that. I've been in the ditch, I've been down in the trenches. I know what it means to build a business. I know what it means to make some money. I also know what it means to work on the railroad, to have worked for a moving van company, to have been a landscaper, to have been a carpet installer, and worked for minimum wage. I know all that. I've been a prince and a pauper, so I know all that. And I also use these examples from my own life as an illustration of how, in my case, selflessness paid off for me. And I also talk a lot about it's not that crazy an idea, because the best leaders are selfless, and they worry more about getting other people promoted than they worry about getting themselves promoted. The best salespeople are selfless. They worry more about their customers' success than they do about their personal success. The best companies don't worry about their profits. They worry about serving their customers. And the profits take care of themselves. If the salesman stays up late into the night, agonizing over how to help his customer, then the sales take care of themselves. If the leader spends all of his time worrying about getting other people promoted, he gets himself promoted. But the problem is we want to turn this into a magic bullet. We want to turn this into a rabbit's foot. But the key thing is it has to be sincere. I think I wrote in the beginning of my book, Business Seekers and Trappist Monks, I said, the key to the Trappist success is you have to be sincere, or you have to be dedicated to becoming sincere. And what does sincerity mean? The salesman who, he literally doesn't worry about his quota. He's not worried about how much money he makes. He really, really is far more concerned about his customer. The great leader is far more concerned about his people than he is about himself. He is far more concerned about his people's career than he is about his own career. And the closer he comes to absolutely having no thought at all about himself, the more successful he's going to be. I keep saying, the more successfully we forget our selfish motivations, the more successful we become. And I use my own background as a demonstration project. I was a good enough salesman to be on the cover of Selling Magazine, but I'm not interested in helping you become a great salesman. I am interested in helping you become a great salesman if it's through selflessness. But if you were looking for my great closing line that I used to sell $5 million in 1 month, when everybody else was selling $1 million, no, I ain't into that. Maybe if you get me drunk, I'll tell you, but it's peripheral. It's not something I'm interested in. And everybody wants to, that's selflessness is great. So tell me exactly how should I go about, should my new product be red or green? I remember a guy called me from years ago. This was a mentoring guy, got in touch with me from Singapore. And he was going to come all the way from Singapore to meet me. I remember he was going to be visiting relatives in New Jersey or New York or something. And he was going to take time out to fly down to meet me. And I said, well, I'm very flattered that you're going to come down here and you're going to pay me and all this kind. I said, so what is it? What's on your mind? He said, because I read in one of your articles or something where you read that interestingly enough, prices can be raised on a product and get more sales. Because there's a thing called perceived value and blah, 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 blah. It's not that esoteric an idea. And I said to him, I said, save your money, save your trip. Save my time. I'm not interested in. I'm not interested in talking to you about that. I mean, that's not what I'm about. Wherever I mentioned it or however I mentioned it, I guarantee it was in the context of some kind of selflessness. You know, and you're just picking that piece out because, yeah, that's what he said. I want to figure out a way to raise prices on my products and get more sales. He wants the trick. And I don't really necessarily blame people. I don't get angry. The cool thing is on every one of these calls that I've done with these mentoring, by the end of the call, I mean, there is an aha moment. I see an aha moment. It's, oh, wow, I get it. I see where I'm wrong, you know? But the thing that I then always say is, okay, but it's not enough for you to have this aha moment. I said, if you don't go out and start yourself a group and get yourself some, you know, an ongoing mentor relationship and an ongoing, you will revert back. You will fall, because that golf swing of yours is so grooved in. I mean, if you go to a really good golf pro, by the end of that first lesson, he will probably provide you with an aha moment. He'll probably, you know, if he's a good pro, because he wants you to come back. So he'll provide, there'll be somewhere along the line where there's going to be an aha moment. But that doesn't mean you're now a good golfer. I love the commercial many years ago. Lee Trevino, you know, he was doing a golf commercial. I think it was Top Flight Balls or something like that. And he's talking about how great these top flight balls are. And he's hitting one after another, and they're all going straight as an arrow, and they're all going a million yards downfield, you know. And so finally at the end of the commercial, he turns around and he gives this big grin into the camera, and he says, and you know, it wouldn't hurt if you hit about a couple thousand of them either. In other words, you got to practice. You got to put the time in. You got to practice it. You got to work on it, you know? Again, I keep coming back to the same stuff. There's a wonderful biography of Warren Buffett called Snowball. And he's in there, the woman writing the wrote said when she was talking to Buffett, he attributes all of it. Now, anybody doesn't know, he's one of the top 5 most richest men in the world. And he's done it with integrity. So he's one of the top respected people in the world. And she said, when he looks back at his life, what does he owe everything to? You think he would say, you know, Graham Dodd, you know, his mentor, Graham, who taught him value investing and all this kind of stuff, or his Wharton Business School. I think he went to Wharton Business, his Wharton Business School, whatever. Oh, he said, no, it's his Dale Carnegie course. I think it's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think it's the name of it. How to Win Friends and Influence People, you know. And he was always shy, introverted guy, and he wanted to be more extroverted, more people-oriented. But the thing that grabbed me about that book was the woman writing it said, but the big difference between the vast majority of people who read that book and Warren Buffett is he worked the system. The vast majority of people read that book and say, wow, that's really cool stuff. And they put it on the shelf and they forget about it. Not Warren Buffett. He worked it and worked it and worked it. And he said sometimes, you know, for a while he'd fall off the wagon and he'd forget about it for a while, but he'd come back to it and work it and work it and work it. One of the things that I really want to ask people that I'm mentoring going for, I think I'm putting together a survey, you know, on a scale of 1, what it all comes down to, and this is whether it's entrepreneurship or anything, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? What are you willing to pay for it? And the only way you're going to work the system the way Warren Buffett works the system is if you want it badly enough. I even came to the conclusion of my own life after I had a cataclysmic spiritual experience in 1998 that I'd been looking for all my life. And once I was unpacking it and trying to grok it, as we used to say in the 60s, I came to the conclusion that all God was waiting for all my life was for me to ask the right question. I was asking always the wrong question. And of course, the right question is, God, come to me however you want to come to me without any, you know, any negotiations on my part. You know, it's like St. Augustine said, you know, Lord, make me celibate, but not yet. You know, I'll do this, but don't ask me, you know, we all end up like the guy that goes to the psychiatrist and says, you know, I'm really. suffering and I'm really depressed and and I lost my job because I can't focus and blah, blah, and I need your help. And frankly, I'm ready to do anything you ask me to do, but let's not talk about my mother. Well, the psychiatrist knows immediately the first thing we need to talk about is your mother. But that's the way we are with God. We're always negotiating. So anyway, I tell them that you're asking the wrong questions. You're asking about short-term payoffs, about, something that's going to pay off for you in the next couple of months or the next, it's kind of like me when I was back in New York back in the early 80s before I got my job at MTV. I was desperate. I was running out of money, and I'd heard about this book, What Color's Your Parachute, which was a big bestseller back then, which supposedly helps you to find a job and everything. And I read the book, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking I was really disappointed. And I said, "Why are you disappointed? Why are you so disappointed in this book?" And all of a sudden I started to laugh. And I said, the reason I was so disappointed is somehow or another I expected it on page 38 it would say, August Turak, if you've read this far, call this number because there's a job waiting for you. This guy was giving me philosophy and stuff, and I wanted a job, now because I need to pay the rent. And this is exactly the kind of attitude that I think most of the people come to. And I say, listen, you got to start asking different kinds of questions. You got to start, questions I'd like to get is, how do I become a better person? How can I be more humble? How can I live with more gratitude? How can I stop being so envious of other people? How can I stop comparing myself to other people? How can I start living for the right kind of values? Where do I go to find the right kind of people that would help me on this path? There's a million questions like that. How can I be more courageous? How can I face my fears better? How come I have such a difficult time saying I'm sorry? But I don't get those questions. I get very, very practical questions that have to do with, sex, lies, and videotapes. What I'm trying to do is point out, that you should be asking these more fundamental questions, because all of life, I've said this in several different videos. I might as well say it again. What's your thoughts because they become your actions? What's your actions because they become your habits? What's your habits because they become your character? And what's your character because it becomes your destiny? The most important thing you have is your character. I feel like a Cassandra. Cassandra was the Trojan princess who was cursed by being given the gift of prophecy, except nobody would ever believe her. So she was the one that was telling the Trojans, don't bring this, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. But nobody listened to her. And I feel like, in some sense, like, because I've developed the ability to read people very well through my spiritual work and through my sales work, and say, I'm a really good, and once I get a conception of a person's character, I know where it's going. I know what particular cliff it's headed for. And more often than not, you can't tell. You can't tell people. It's really, really, they're not ready to be told. They're not ready to learn. Thanks for watching. Since you got this far, would you mind hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel? Thanks for helping out. I'll see you next time. God bless.